Hi there, it's Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com here with a positive video for a change. Usually I am known for my rant videos with incessantly complaining about Wizard of the Coast or Standard or whatever, but this time I have a positive message, and that is Standard is really good right now. So if you come over to the metagame over at MTG Goldfish, I wouldn't take this at face value. So it says right now that Bantlands is just absolutely dominating the format. That's true to an extent, but how MTG Goldfish gets its data right now is it takes any list, not even decks that may have had a positive win percentage. It's just anything they have available from a large tournament, they'll throw on this. And so Bantlands is being skewed right now from the many lists that were ran at the standard mocks, and they did pretty well. There was Bantlands 6-1 and a bunch at 5-2s, but it didn't even end up winning that particular tournament. So this video topic, I just want to talk about how much I'm enjoying Standard right now, how I think it's wide open, and where it goes from here. So my favorite Standard of all time was, I believe it was Innistrad Return to Ravnica. I think that meta at that particular time period was really, really good because there were just so many decks that were viable, and it seemed like every week there would be a new top dog only to be toppled the next week by a counter deck that was specifically built to beat it. And we're seeing this start. We had week 0 that was really dominated by the black value-based decks, so like black-green or black-red, and Bantlands now has combated those out of the equation, and now I think we're going to get some decks that actually beat Bantlands. So standards typically tend to be stale when either aggro or control is pushed. So the last few years we've had aggro really, really pushed, and the years before that we had control decks that were very, very pushed and end up being the best deck. So it was hard to actually veer from those decks. Think of the time with like the Teamer Energy. That was like an impossible standard to brew around because Teamer Energy was just so efficient. And then we had the Hazoret Red time period, or even the Vehicles time period, and even more recently, we've had some control decks like the Teferi decks and whatnot that have just been really, really tough to build a particular strategy that is both A, good against that deck, and B, good against the other decks that are running around in the meta. So right now I think it's wide open, and a little bit of anecdotal evidence with that with playing on MTG Owned Arena. I tend to see a ton of different decks, but if you actually look at these standard leagues, there are plenty of decks that are viable right now, and I mean different ones than they were last week. So if we expand the decks, you see these cool decks like Azorius Artifacts. Now how this works with these standard leagues is any deck that goes 5-0, which is unique enough by I believe 10 or 15 cards, correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section below, will be posted to the Standard League postings on MTG or Magic the Gathering's mother site. So there have been standards when maybe 3 or 4 decks show up because that's how dominant like Teamer Energy or Hazoret Red was. That it was very, very tough to find in the scope of how vast Standard players are and how many Brewers there are. There were only a handful that were able to manage a 5-0. This particular list is very, very diverse and has a ton of different decks that are kind of unique and were able to compete in the meta. So this first one being the Azorius Artifacts is just amazing with the Mystic Forge. So Mystic Forge being able to cast artifacts off the top of your library, and running a bunch of artifacts that get bigger with Steel Overseer. So this deck just looks really, really sweet. It's also got the All That Glitters to make your particular threat like a Ginger Brute that becomes unblockable huge, or you even have a trample on the Stonecoil Serpent. And this is just awesome that a deck like this can 5-0. Typically speaking, yeah, you're correct if you're saying, well, this is how week 1s typically are. Yes, but there have also been some week 1s that have been very, very dismal. Think of Ravnica Allegiance week 1. It was pretty much dominated by the Hydroid Krasis decks. This one, even though Hydroid Krasis is still a real good card, you can see it's number 2 card, and there's Murderous Rider and Questing Beast up there. It seems to have a more diverse amount of decks that can actually be viable, and that's exactly where you want a standard meta to be. And even some of these that didn't show up on this list, I think there are a lot of viable decks. I don't think I saw like Azorius Flyers, for example, or I did see one flavor of like Blue-Green Flash, but there are plenty of decks in the scope of Magic right now in Standard that can be competitive. So I'm just going to go through a few of them that I find very, very interesting with these sort of archetypes that people will come up with. This, of course, this Azorius Artifacts deck is just really, really sweet with a affinity take, kind of like affinity take in Standard, which has the ability to get a ton of value off of cards like Mystic Forge and Arcanist Owl, and then finish off the game with all the glitters and a big Ginger Brute that becomes unblockable. We come down here and we see there's even a Gadwick control deck that is now using Gadwick to gain a ton of card advantage, and this one also can tap down creatures at instant speed on your opponent's turn, making them not be able to attack in. So between Gadwick and Teferi really clogging up the board, this is on the very high end spectrum of control. They're finishing off with Finale of Glory, another card that hasn't seen much play. So this right now is viable. I mean, I'm not a fan of control, I know a lot of people aren't a fan of control, but it's, it's this really on the one end of the spectrum control is viable in the format at the moment. Of course, we got the go-to deck of Bant lands, which we've seen a ton of, which there are a ton of flavors of Bant lands, which is why I like it so much. I've seen Bant lands with splashing many colors just to get a ton of value out of Golos. Tyler's Pilgrim, this one's just trying to be more on, really focus on the Bant and really, really ramping towards just getting that Field of Dread and then getting the zombies out. Again, there's a lot of ways to customize this deck, and that's another indication of a really, really strong Standard. Bant Ramp is very similar, but this one is using the old school mass manipulation as well as just going with Oko to then switch off other creatures. I'm surprised this one isn't using Agent of Treachery. Up it is in the sideboard because that can be a very good card advantage with Oko. But these ones are very common with the Time Wipe and Teferi being the splash for white to just get tons of advantage out of your own cards and just out-ramp your opponents. So another, pretty sweet card, or a pretty sweet deck with having ramp viable in the format. This one is another one that really stood out, this Boros Knights. These have playing cards that I wanted to see play, like the Acclaimed Contender, which just gets a lot of value off of being able to not only grab either more creatures or grab a finisher in the form of Embercleave. So Embercleave, the mythic equipment, has a place in Standard right now. It's a very go-wide strategy that then you can cast this for basically 2 red mana, put a double strike and trample on a creature, and then get a lot of value out of this card. Embercleaves also tend to be pretty decent in multiples, as you can then cast another Embercleave, destroying the one that's equipped to a creature, but equipped to an unblocked creature, which has a nice little combat trick. So Boros Knights is a viable strategy right now in the format. We have some combo decks in the form of Dance of Mance. I have my own version of Dance of Mance, which is the 4-color version of this deck, which I really like, but this one's just a Dance of Mance with just the trying to get as many Doom Foretold and Oath of Kaya's, and then get value out of them, and then recur them back with Dance of Mance to finish off the opponent. So this one's a nice little combo control base strategy. We have another 4-color Golos that is another ramp-based strategy, but then going into the more colors to get the value out of both Golos and Kenrith. I've also seen some very interesting decks with Kenrith Return King with Wilderness Reclamation. So Wilderness Reclamation coming out, and then Kenrith, and then being able to utilize a bunch of triggers or a bunch of activated abilities off of Kenrith, which was a very neat little deck. So the Buy Box promo we've been seeing play in Standard. We go down to these adventure decks, these kind of these tempo aggro based strategies that have the Lovestruck Beast with the Edgewall Innkeeper just getting a ton of value, and then followed up with the old school Find Finality to get even more value. Or I've seen other Planeswalkers in this mist, like Vraskas or Garrix. They're very customizable in this sort of strategy. You can even go, I've seen these adventure decks even go into Gruul. I've even seen them go into Celestia. That's the one that actually won the Star City Open. And aggro decks, very, very viable still. We still have Gruul aggro. I've seen this also customized, plenty of other cards that are viable in this strategy. I have my own flavor of this that works off +1/+1 counters with Vivian and the new Goblin Shaman, where they enter in with a +1 counter just to get maximum value out of the adapt creatures. So even these Gruul type aggro shells are viable. Going on to Izzet controls with a lot of these adventure spells of getting 2-for-1s. And the list just keeps going on and on. This double draw deck is really sweet with the Royal Scions, another mythic that was pretty hyped up, but it had a poor showing like the week 0. But then this deck looks really sweet with the Royal Scions just getting value off of Dreadhorde Arcanist. So cool little things here. I'd like to actually see people expand this more with Royal Scions plusing Dreadhorde Arcanist, giving it +2/+0 and allowing it to cast converted mana cost 3 spells, which I think gives this a bit more oomph than what Dreadhorde Arcanist usually gives, which is opt-in shocks. But so I'd like to see some people actually, try that out with the Dreadhorde Arcanist. See if they can even get up to like 4 mana for the Rouse Outburst type cards. I think that'd be pretty sweet and pretty value with the Dreadhorde Arcanist and Royal Scions deck. So still have like the Jeskai Fires Super Friends or just the old school Super Friends of Sarkhan Masterless. Mono Black Aggro has a ton of different varieties and flavors, going heavy on like the Araya First of Locktwain, or even going more on the aggressive with the Spawn of Mayhem. There's still that giant that I think would be pretty fun to play with the 8/8 trample, with you playing it with the fairy that shuts down triggers, so you just get an 8/8 trample for 5 mana. That'd be pretty fun to actually look. So I mean, these two mono black decks were different enough that they both were able to hit, and then you can actually even go into Orzhov, you can go into Golgari Aristocrats, Orzhov Aristocrats, Rakdos Aristocrats, and have your own flavors there as well. We still have Mono Green Stompy that's still there. Mono Red Aggro is still there in its various forms and flavors. You can go Cavalcade. You can go this one that's just trying to really maximize Torbran, Thane of the Redfell. It is just wide open. I think you get the picture here. So anyway, I just want to say I'm very, very excited to start brewing in Standard. You're going to see a lot more brews from me, maybe more about talking about Magic the Gathering. It's been a long time since I've been really excited about Magic. You saw there for about a year, 2 years, kind of just bowed out. Didn't really like playing, didn't really like the issues with the community. I'm going to ignore that. I don't care anymore. I'm just here to play the game. People can go do their nonsense on Twitter and whatnot. I'm just going to pretend they don't exist and not let it bother me. But anyway, we're going to keep brewing decks, and I've got a lot of goodies here. You'll see later on today my top 10 list of cards that I want to brew around, a little bit late to the party. A lot of those cards have actually seen Tier 1 strategies, but I would like to really put my brewing skills to the test like the old school days and just focus on a card, see what I can do with a card, whether or not it's successful or not, and see if any time is the time, it's right now, Standard right now, that I think brewing is alive and well. Let me know in the comment section below how you think about Standard. Maybe I'm just a little bit misguided. Again, I think that Bant lands, you're never going to stop people from doing this. This is just Sheeple in a nutshell. So tryhards and Sheeple will always copy the last tournament that did well, and it's going to then give like a feedback loop of performance. So if there's, look at this tournament. Of course, Bantlands is going to do well when everybody ran it. So if everybody and their mom is running Bantlands, you're going to get a bit of a skewed data here, because of course if there's 50% of the decks that are running the particular deck, it's probably going to have 50% of the wins. It has to be statistically bad, not even statistically average, to get any other outcome than that. So it'll be interesting going forward how the meta adapts. We've seen the meta adapt quickly in this Standard, where one deck is the unbeatable deck to go away next week and then be replaced with another deck and even come full circle. If this, again, reminds me of that good Return to Ravnica and Innistrad days, where I even feel at the very end of that season that we were still scratching the surface of what was possible with that Standard. So anyway, we've got some good months hopefully coming ahead. Hopefully no one solves it, and we can continue to play a variety of fun, interesting decks. This has been Kevin with the Rogue Deck Builder. Thanks for watching.